December 26, 2025, is a special day. It was the 132nd birthday of China's late Chairman Mao. We also uploaded a video to remember the giant who transformed the 5,000-year-old China in less than 50 years. It was also the day when China's high-speed rail mileage surpassed 50,000 kilometers, accounting for more than 80% of the world's total. We are going to make a video about it later this month. On the same day, People's Daily, the official news outlet of Beijing, published an article condemning America's arms sales to Taiwan, which was the largest ever in history. Today's topic is Taiwan's military spending, which primarily benefits the U.S. military-industrial complex, as it views Taiwan as a reliable source of income. The mic is especially happy with Taiwan's tolerance of its excessive offers. Taiwan separatists don't care how much American weapons cost. Price is never an issue, availability is. Recently, Taiwan got a promise from the U.S. to sell it a bunch of weapons worth over $11 billion. Beijing was furious. Following Washington's announcement of unprecedented large-scale arms sales to the Chinese island, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced countermeasures against 20 U.S. defense companies and 10 senior executives. Beijing said the measures were legitimate, necessary, and intended to safeguard China's sovereignty, security, and development interests, while serving as a warning against further provocation. China accused the United States of breaking its commitments by selling weapons to Taiwan, saying the move violates the One China principle and the Three China-U.S. joint communiques, interferes in China's internal affairs, and undermines its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The arms package, valued at more than $11 billion, the largest on record, includes systems such as HIMARS rocket launchers and loitering munitions, which China described as offensive in nature. Beijing questioned Washington's credibility, noting that the United States repeatedly affirms its adherence to the One China policy while continuing to arm Taiwan. China reiterated that the Taiwan issue is the most sensitive red line in China-U.S. relations and warned that actions harming its core interests would not go unanswered. Beijing said the motivations behind U.S. arms sales to Taiwan are clear, leveraging the Taiwan card for domestic political gain, containing China through military means, and benefiting the U.S. defense industry. Chinese officials argued that none of these objectives serve the interests of Taiwan's population. They criticized the administration of Ching-te for welcoming the arms sales, calling its belief in the U.S. security commitments a dangerous illusion. Military analysts cited by China said the focus on anti-landing equipment indicates Washington has no intention of directly defending Taiwan, but rather seeks to complicate China's reunification efforts while extracting economic benefits from the island. China warned that pursuing independence through external support or independence through force would impose severe economic costs on Taiwan. Officials argued that the more than $11 billion spent on arms could instead fund hospitals, transportation infrastructure, or social welfare programs. They also criticized Taipei's broader approach to relations with Washington, accusing the Ching-te administration of making excessive concessions in trade and industry, including allowing the erosion of Taiwan's key industrial advantages. China said plans to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2030 would further squeeze public spending on pensions, education, and social services, undermining Taiwan's long-term prospects. Beijing also warned that such policies risk dragging Taiwan toward conflict. Chinese officials said that no amount of military buildup by pro-independence forces could alter the balance of power, arguing that attempts to resist reunification by force would be futile. China urged the Ching-te administration to abandon reliance on external powers, reassess the regional security reality, and avoid endangering the interests of Taiwan's 23 million residents. The statements came amid intensified political tensions in Taiwan. On the same day, an impeachment motion against Ching-te, introduced by lawmakers from the Kuomintang and the Taiwan People's Party, passed in Taiwan's legislative body. Local media reported that an online petition calling for the impeachment of Ching-te had attracted more than 8 million signatories. China said the developments reflect growing domestic opposition to policies it described as reckless, adding that efforts to pursue independence through external backing or military means are destined to fail. The Pentagon on Monday released its latest annual report on China's military and security developments, the first such assessment issued during the current U.S. administration, warning that China's historic military buildup is making the U.S. homeland increasingly vulnerable. The report said Washington does not seek to stifle, dominate, or humiliate China. Still, it argued that Beijing has developed nuclear, naval, long-range conventional strike, cyber and space capabilities that could directly threaten U.S. security. It said the People's Liberation Army is steadily advancing toward its 2027 goals, including achieving what the report described as a strategic, decisive victory over Taiwan, establishing a strategic counterbalance against the United States and exerting deterrence and control over other regional states. According to the roughly 100-page document, the PLA in 2024 tested key elements of its military options through exercises targeting maritime and land objectives, forces in the Pacific region, and critical ports. The report said Chinese strike capabilities could extend 1,500 to 2,000 nautical miles from the mainland, potentially challenging and disrupting the U.S. military presence in and around conflict zones in the Asia-Pacific. Some analysts cited by Bloomberg News have warned that China has taken the lead in developing hypersonic weapons. The Pentagon report noted that Washington's planned Golden Dome missile defense system is intended to counter emerging threats, including hypersonic weapons, as well as more traditional ballistic missiles. It said the United States aims to maintain sufficient strength to deter potential adversaries from considering provocation, thereby preserving peace. Chinese military experts interviewed by China's state-run media outlet, Global Times, said the report follows previous Pentagon assessments by exaggerating the China threat and portraying China's military modernization as destabilizing. They also said the document reflects a shift in U.S. perceptions, acknowledging that the United States does not hold a clear military advantage in the Western Pacific. The report focuses heavily on China's military activities in 2024. Analysts quoted by the South China Morning Post said the document appeared hastily compiled, noting the absence of a table of contents and sections that seemed outdated. On broader ties with Beijing, the report adopted a more restrained tone, saying U.S.-China relations were at their best in years under President Donald Trump, and that the Pentagon would support efforts to sustain the positive momentum, including engagement with the PLA, which makes the report more like a briefing from a Chinese government clerk. Li Haidong, a professor at the China Foreign Affairs University, said the report, along with earlier U.S. national security documents, suggests Washington has adjusted its assessment of China's capabilities, how they may be used, and the nature of U.S.-China interactions, particularly after recent wargaming exercises in the Western Pacific highlighted limits to U.S. military advantages. From the report, we can see the anxiety of the U.S. military over China's strike capabilities, which indirectly admits the U.S. has lost its advantage in the West Pacific. Taiwan is an island less than 80 nautical miles from the Chinese mainland, but it is thousands of nautical miles away from the United States. How can the U.S. troops dare to defend Taiwan? The U.S. could lose 2 or 3 aircraft carriers in the West Pacific and dozens of cruisers in a conflict with Beijing, and would still lose Taiwan to China. If the U.S. failed to defend Taiwan, the rest of the world would no longer believe the U.S. could protect them either. Whether the U.S. defends or abandons Taiwan, its global dominance and credibility will be eroded. So the best strategy for the U.S. is to arm Taiwan so it can delay the unification, and avoid clarifying whether it defends the island or not. The U.S. president is visiting Beijing soon, and the unprecedentedly large arms sales to Taiwan are more like a stress test for President Xi Jinping, as Donald Trump is good at the so-called art of making deals. Taiwan is China's Taiwan, but the U.S. attempts to sell it back to China at a good price. It is like China selling Hawaii or Alaska to the United States. The deal with Taiwan is nothing but a void check, as the U.S. has literally depleted its munition stockpile. Moreover, China's countermeasures will hit the U.S. military industry, making it unable to produce the weapons for the island. China's control over rare earths is more effective than the Taiwan card. Beijing and Washington are staring at each other, waiting to see who blinks first.